Viruses are generally regarded as not alive. They have no cellular structure and do not reproduce on their own, though we do have trillions of them inside our bodies. They are tiny bits of genetic material, either RNA or DNA, packaged in tiny protein balls that appear to exit and enter cells. Sound familiar? We believe that some of these entities are infectious and pathogenic, transmitting amongst humans and reproducing inside our bodies, causing illness and death. So let's look at the situation for this coronavirus and compare what is happening to these two theories. Let's first consider the origin story of the coronavirus. A group of people had respiratory illness unresolved by antibiotics, so medical officials began looking, of course, for a virus. What they eventually found under the electron microscope were small protein balls being excreted by the cell. Okay, first comparison. This would make sense in both exosome theory and virus theory. Then they searched for and found an RNA fragment that they had not seen before in some of these patients. This would make sense in both exosome theory and virus theory.
Now, one of the things we have to talk about is, what does this ultimately mean? So there's a couple of problems, is that this bill itself is not specific as to what these people would do. So let's say that you have a contact tracing app and you're monitored and you're followed. What happens now? So you've been in the Walmart 2 weeks ago. Someone with COVID was also in Walmart 2 weeks ago. In theory, you're being monitored for that. So what happens? Well, the bill doesn't specify that. It doesn't specify what the actual work of this contact tracing will be. It says that people will be quarantined. Does that mean you will be forcibly quarantined, required to be quarantined? Does it mean you'll be separated from family? Remember, there was a news conference held in Ventura County, California, just a couple of weeks ago, and it brought a lot of heat, and the director of health in Ventura County actually backed off of his statements. But what he said was very clear. I'm going to play this clip for you, because what he's saying is, if you have COVID-19 and these contact tracers find you in a home and there's only one bathroom, then someone with COVID would have to be forcibly removed from that home, or even in some cases, children forcibly removed from the home.
Now, Annette has been eating completely raw for 27 years. Now, we want to remind everyone, no matter how old you think she really looks, she changed her lifestyle to feel better and have a good quality of life. And her husband says, I wish I had done what she did. And I said, well, is it too late? He goes, yeah, it's too late for me.
She looks fantastic, but in this day and age, you know, a lot of people asking you, has she had plastic surgery?
She hasn't. She said she hasn't had any plastic surgery. She said, but never say never. Because she said, maybe when I'm 80, I might change my mind. But she hasn't had any plastic surgery. And it's really neat because he says she's so beautiful. And he says when he wants to get help when he goes to like the grocery store or something, he says, Annette, you walk in front of me because you get all the attention and then I'll be able to ask the questions.
Works out in his favor there.
And her kids, her two boys are in their 50s, early 50s.
Yeah. How was the orange juice? I saw you tasting it.
It was very good. And she literally drinks all that through like a week or 2 weeks. Yeah, it's amazing.
It's a full-time job, I'm sure,
it
prepping
is.
that food.
It is.
Tanya,
great story, Tanya.
Very enlightening and eye-opening. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Now, do you think Annette's worried about COVID-19? It is said that the ocean contains enormous quantities of Thyself, or potassium sulfate, in addition to the other three combinations of this potassium salt. It is highly electric. Liebig stated many years ago that potassium is the essential alkali of the animal body, and this is true of the human body. In combination with sulfur, it forms oil, or Thyself, potassium sulfate. What do you mean, alkali? A carbonate or hydroxide of an alkali metal, slippery like oil, caustic and characteristically basic in reactions, any of a various soluble mineral salts found in natural waters and arid soils? Do you mean like hydroxychloroquine or chlorine dioxide?
In 1 year alone, 2009, 23,000 young girls in India, were inoculated. According to Kennedy, 1,200 suffered severe side effects, with 7 young girls actually dying. As if India wasn't enough, Gates took his vaccine tour to Africa, where 50 of the 500 vaccinated children there developed paralysis. The left is always yammering on about colonialism, but apparently it's okay for leftist white men to use a nation to advance their social engineering, especially a black nation. Newspapers in South Africa took note. Quote, "We are guinea pigs for the drug makers," blared the headlines. So why does any of this matter beyond the level of pure disgust? Because Gates's money opens whatever doors he wants open, and right now, vaccines are all the rage. There's a love triangle between Dr. Anthony Fauci, the WHO, and Bill Gates, an interrelationship that many are becoming extremely bothered by, particularly in light of leftist governors talking about mandatory vaccines and penalties for refusing.
Now, they did not prove that they could infect somebody, or an animal, with a purified form of this so-called virus. They simply assumed that this RNA fragment was the cause of the illness they saw in some patients, and they assumed it was contagious. So do you know how the tests work? It's not a binary test, like a pregnancy test. It's called a PCR test, and it involves amplifying genetic material by doubling it in dozens of cycles until you have billions or trillions of the original molecules, and then using those results to determine if you have enough of the identified RNA fragment to be considered positive. Here's the thing. At a certain point of amplification, every single person would test positive. They use an arbitrary cutoff point where they stop doubling the material. That cutoff point is different amongst different tests for COVID-19. In fact, there were 10 different cutoff points amongst the 33 tests approved by the FDA.
We are beginning a program today which will certainly grow into something larger and larger, and that is a community contact tracing program. We've done contact tracing all along. That a contact is a person who's been exposed to someone that we document to have the COVID infection. When we find someone who has a COVID infection, those people are immediately isolated. But we also work with them to figure out who their contacts were. But the purpose of this program is to bring on people. We may bring on up to 50 or even more as the program grows and as we see the needs for it. As we do more testing, we will find more and more people who have COVID-19. And again, we'll isolate every one of them, and we will find every one of their contacts, and we will make sure that they stay quarantined, and we'll check in with them every day. We're going to do a more complete job, and we're going to do a more meticulous job of making it less and less possible for others in the county to run into someone with COVID-19 infection. It's not just our county. There are going to be thousands of people hired who will be these contact investigators throughout the state. And this is occurring in many, many other states as well, perhaps all of the states in our country. We will be giving intensive training to these people, identifying and finding contacts. Some of the people we find are going to have trouble being isolated. For instance, if they live in a home where there's only one bathroom and there are 3 or 4 other people living there, and those people don't have COVID infection, we're not going to be able to keep the person in that home. Every person who we're isolating, for instance, needs to have their own bathroom. And so we'll be moving people like this into other kinds of housing that we have available.
Is this why Rockefeller-controlled Big Pharma immediately labels the term quack to any virologist who insists things like, "My bottom line still holds the truth that the terrain or internal environment is everything, and the germ or so-called virus is nothing. The germ or so-called virus can only be a symptom of cellular breakdown due to an imbalance of the delicate alkaline pH balance of the body's fluids or oils, and not the cause of that breakdown?
Lots of ideas are being dropped into the media about travel cards, certificates to prove you've been vaccinated before you're going to be allowed into a store, and so forth. Perhaps the wisest advice on all of this is that same Italian Minister of Parliament who said a resistance must form against the lockdown measures and a refusal to submit to any mandatory vaccine program that might be presented by Gates and his allies in the medical industrial complex. This story is only now taking shape. Be assured, there is much more to come. Much more.
Now, the director of health walked back those comments a couple of days later, but it didn't really matter because he meant what he said at the time. It was very clear what he was saying. And here's the problem that we're facing through all of this right now, is that at this point, what's being introduced through this bill, this contact tracing bill, is not about health. That's already been established. It's not about protecting the public. That's already been established. It's about tracking and monitoring and controlling the public. There is a petition on change.org, and I just want to read to you some of what it says because I think it very well lays out why this bill is so wrong and violates the law in so many ways. But H.R. 666 violates inalienable rights to one's person, home, and property, to one's life, freedoms, privacy, and security. It is a violation of the Fourth Amendment, as well as the First, Fifth, Eighth, and Ninth Amendments of the Bill of Rights. It is an illegal act of forced medical treatment upon we the people, and an invasion into our local communities. It's an invasion into our local communities, but it's being cleverly created in a way that allows the invasion to be made by those already in the local communities. And more importantly, go back to those words, is a violation of the Fourth, the First, the Fifth, the Eighth, and the Ninth Amendments of our Bill of Rights. It's incredible to think how the founders and framers have established for so long this rule of law in our country that would protect us as individuals from the collective mob. And all of that has been for so long being wiped away. But in this moment that we're in now, it is being finished off with bills that are being pushed forward with this idea that it's just for the protection of the community, when so clearly it is not.
You might find it interesting that the Nobel Prize-winning inventor of the test did not believe it should be used to diagnose infectious illness. And perhaps you've heard about some of the problems with the test, such as the high rate of false positives. But in any case, let's say that after 37 times of doubling a specific genetic material they found in your body, they determine that you have enough of the RNA they are looking for to be considered positive. This could make sense in both exosome theory and virus theory. But clearly there are clusters of people getting ill. Look at New York City. It must be a virus. However, if you are being poisoned by something in your environment, it's likely people near you are too. And if we commonly purge these poisons during specific times of the year, many people may have symptoms of illness all at once. This fits either theory. Now, here's where things get interesting. Let's go to the Diamond Princess cruise ship situation.